What is crisis? Crisis is a very different type of committee from the normal GA or even a specialized body. In it, you are playing an individual in a historical circumstance and work together with other individuals to solve whatever problems the crisis staff throw at you. A crisis arc is what your overall goal in committee as a character is. These goals are usually lofty, but can be whatever you as the delegate decides. Personal crisis arcs could be anything from taking over the government of a country and placing yourself as the dictator, to single-handedly forming a pirate fleet and retiring on a private island with your gold. It is important to remember, however, that an arc should be theoretically reachable. If you don't have a plan to get to your end goal, it might be a good idea to either research more, to find a way to accomplish this goal, or to choose an easier and more suitable goal for your character and their personal powers. Keep in mind that your personal crisis notes are essential to accomplishing your crisis arc. Every so often, your crisis director and several crisis staffers will come in to give what is known as a crisis update. A crisis update is either a report of a new issue for committee to debate or a description of how the committee's previous actions have been successful and/or unsuccessful. After each crisis update, the crisis director will establish how many questions they take from delegates in reference to the recent or previous updates. For example, if the scenario was that committee members had recently discovered an explosive device in the basement of the building they were based in, but no action was taken, the next crisis update might consist of an explosion destroying their meeting place, potentially resulting in casualties. It is imperative to respond quickly to most crisis updates, especially if there is a time limit imposed by the crisis director. The typical way delegates address the updates is through creating and debating group directives. Group directives drive the committee forward. They are what is usually debated in committee as a response to the crisis update. They are usually formed by an individual or two and then passed around committee during debates for people to sign on to. The dais will specify how many sponsors and signatories are needed for a vote on the directive. An important note is that group directives are not like the typical resolutions seen in GAs. In GAs, you spend the entirety of a committee working towards a final goal of a resolution as a solution to the problems the assembly faces. In crisis, directives are more frequent in responses to the crisis updates. They are quick, informal, usually bulleted solutions that use the committee's total power to try to respond to the problem introduced by the crisis updates or to further the committee's power. Usually these are performed and passed or denied quickly by the body as a whole. The crisis staff will then look at the directives passed and inform the committee in the next update on the effect of these directives on the given status of the world. A great group directive will be specific and address the events happening in committee. It is important to pass these quickly. This group directive is specific and it addresses the previous crisis update by sending troops to the threatened border. How to write crisis notes, aka personal directives. In crisis, you get a character assignment and a list of portfolio powers. You use these portfolio powers to help further your personal goals in your crisis arc. Your total powers are not limited to what is specified in your portfolio powers, and usually these are used to increase the amount of resources you hold. Consider them as building blocks or stepping stones to build off of. To use these powers, write a note in your notepad specifying what you would want to happen and how you plan to accomplish it. Then, when crisis staff comes around to collect the notes, hand it to them so they can take it to the back room to write a response and then later return it. Depending on what was attempted and how detailed the note was, your action can either succeed, fail, or pass with conditions or consequences. The more detailed the note, the more likely it is to succeed. For example, if you attempt to move soldiers from one place to another, specify how many and how they are going to get there safely, including any special precautions and resources given to them, like scouting parties and how you plan to feed and keep them once they arrive. These personal notes are not seen by any other delegates and remain secret unless you either share them or someone else's personal actions interfere, such as with a spy. Depending on what you accomplish, your personal notes can affect the information given in the crisis update. For example, if the President of the United States' daughter was kidnapped and held for ransom, this would be a new issue for everyone in committee to address if it were a committee consisting of the U.S. Executive Cabinet. This is an example of a personal directive. It gives specific information. A good personal directive will be specific and help to achieve your arc. Joint personal directives, aka JPDs, are notes created by more than one delegate that is exclusively between signatories of the directive. You specify what you want to happen and how it's going to happen, usually including resources from the parties involved, and each person signs on to it. If someone wanted to break into a house but didn't know how to get in, they could make a deal with another delegate to have them distract the inhabitants long enough for their thieves to get in and ransack the place. The two delegates would then split the profits in a way specified in the JPD sent in. In order for a JPD to be accepted, all delegates involved must sign their own characters' names at the bottom. You can leave the JPD in your notebook for crisis to respond to. JPDs are usually done in an attempt to accomplish something more quickly and powerfully than in a personal directive alone, sacrificing an element of secrecy, though the note remains known only to the delegates involved, for a boost in effectiveness due to the increased resource input. This is a good example of a joint personal directive because it is specific and it helps both positions by protecting the Minister of Health's camps and giving the Minister of Defense access to the camps. It also has both signatures at the bottom. Now that you know all the individual parts of a crisis committee, it is time to put them together to understand the flow of the crisis committee. You'll start off like any committee by proposing a moderated caucus. Pretty quickly, crisis staff will come to give you an update. You will then have the chance to ask pertinent questions to help the committee determine the scope or severity of the situation. Following this update, the chair will most likely call for any points or motions due to the changing situation. You will then propose and vote on the caucus, and in that caucus you will debate or discuss the situation facing the committee. During moderated caucuses, you should be advancing your personal arc through personal directives in your personal notepads, as well as making speeches and formulating group directives. Pass these group directives around the committee room to get signators. During unmoderated caucus, meet with other delegates to form joint personal directives or to combine and strengthen individual group directives. Pool your resources as a committee to create detailed and effective group directives. Recruit others to your directive and gain signatures. Once the directive has enough signatures, send it to the dais. Once there are several directives in front of the dais, you can vote to introduce directives. The chair will read out the contents and people who are signatories and sponsors. Then it will be time to vote on the directive, and there will be the opportunity for delegates to speak for and against each one. It is okay for multiple directives to pass, but if they are conflicting, you might not get your desired result, as crisis staff will decide how they impact committee. It is very important to continue writing personal crisis notes throughout this process. Specific detailed notes will help you affect committee, advance your goals, and win awards. Crisis committees are usually fraught with controversial topics, and we ask the delegates to please be respectful of any race, gender, sexual orientation, or religion brought up in committee, and to refrain from making degrading comments on any of these subjects in committee. In addition to this, we also ask you to refrain from using any accents that are not your natural accent, even if they are period or contextually appropriate. Now, go and enjoy your crisis.